Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and I'll be your guide on this journey from consciousness to cluelessness and back around again. Today on the podcast, I have the pleasure of talking to Bill Muir. Bill is a former Army combat veteran, a martial artist, a published author, a registered nurse, a musician, and he's been vegan since 1992. Whoa. He is a role model for anyone who is trying to learn how to piece the different facets of our identities together. And he's also a lovely human who stuck with it throughout the many technology issues we had to get this episode recorded. You'll hear some fuzziness throughout, but I hope you enjoy it no matter what. Here we go. All right, so again, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
First question I like to ask is just kind of a question about you. So the podcast is Consciously Clueless.
Cool.
And that name came from this place of wanting to acknowledge how life, sometimes you feel like you're totally with it, you get it, you're conscious, you're on top of it. And then other moments you're like, no idea what I'm doing. I'm so clueless. So how are you feeling in this moment on that spectrum?
In this moment, well, full disclosure, as an RN who works nights, I just worked a 13-hour shift. So this is normally past my bedtime. It's 09:06 my time. So you have slightly altered mental status in the hospital, we would call AMS. I'm slightly like that, but it also, and usually there's two versions of me when I'm sleepy like this, kind of like loopy me, and that's where I am now. And there's also grumpy cat me. Luckily you have like loopy, kind of like silly, friendly.
Oh, good.
This will be fun versus some of my coworkers like me better when I'm grumpy because I come up with like little funny quips, but that's not meant to be funny. It's just be like ah. Yeah.
So you just said RN. So take me through that journey, I guess. And I'm guessing there's a lot of pieces to it because on Instagram, you're Sergeant Vegan.
Yes, ma'am.
So your bio is vegan combat veteran, registered nurse. There's a lot to unpack there.
That was originally, so before all that, I was in bands. So if there was more lines, I would add, I used to be in a punk rock band or whatever, and I did some projects that got kind of slightly nerd famous. And then the thought is, do I add that too? Sometimes I'll mention that. If you look through the post, I'll go through that. But then it's like, how much do I want to add, and do I want to like confuse people? I don't know.
Right. So tell me about your time as a combat veteran.
Sure. So I joined the service after 9/11. So pre 9/11, I was living in Japan. So my whole career up until that point, my first degree is a bachelor's in Japanese. I didn't know what I would do with a bachelor's in Japanese, so I moved to Japan. I wanted to become a translator. I started moving to become a translator. I studied martial arts.
Wow.
As a vegan straight edge individual, very heavy into the punk and like hardcore music scene, I started getting into bands and playing in bands in the Tokyo scene. And that led me to sing on the Final Fantasy X soundtrack. And then so I started moving toward trying to make, I wouldn't say a career, but I started to do like little TV spots. And then I think like, I wonder if I could make something of, of this whole thing. Then 9/11 hit, and it was like a punch in the face. Like I had been living abroad for so long. And at that point, I didn't even, I guess I wasn't even really thinking of myself as an American, whatever that means. Like, because I had been, most of my friends weren't American. Most of my friends were either Japanese or British or Australian expats. And it just was like my whole world was rocked. And I mean, everybody too that was whether you were here in the States or whether you're abroad, it just felt like the end of days or something like that.
Right.
And so I thought, like, okay, first thing I'll do is maybe because there was a feeling, I'm kind of one of those people that has to do something. That it's one of my many character flaws is feel like I have to always do something or fix something. So
I relate to that. Our strengths are sometimes our weaknesses, right?
yep. So after 9/11, I started organizing benefit shows for I think children who's on. I started to realize that we were less than good. Things in Afghanistan, dropping bombs on civilians. So then I started also making some of the benefits toward the children who had died in bombings in Afghanistan, and join the military and do something like hands-on. So I did just that. I left Japan. I went home. I joined the army, and I became a medic. And there's I guess a couple minor twists and turns along the way that I bring up in my book. I had thought about becoming a ranger, originally special forces. So with the ranger, that went kind of a side project. I ended up becoming a paratrooper with the 173rd Airborne.
Oh, wow.
And then I served in Afghanistan for a year. And I often thought, while I was there, wouldn't it be ironic if we were killing some of the people that benefited from some of my benefit shows? And so after getting back from the States, I thought, okay, what do I really want to do with my life at this time? And the thought was, more than anything, I want to start a vegan restaurant. I want to help make the world a better place. And politics and war and the military, I didn't think any of that really did it, but just stopping the global destruction, climate change, and the really inhumane practice of slaughterhouses, I think, or at least contributing to people having an alternative would be, a step in the right direction. So I went to culinary school. Oh, wow. Then I started trying to open a restaurant, and not having partners and having capital at that time, I just kind of wondered what I was going to do with it. And it was 2008. I don't think vegan had really taken off.
Yeah, you were ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I was a little too ahead of my time, which ironically, had it taken off, maybe it would have, even if it had done really well with COVID, who knows what would have happened.
Right.
But 2010, the Haiti earthquake happened. And once again, I felt like that I needed to do something. So an NGO brought me to Haiti, and I worked in Haiti just because I still had my certification as a medic.
Okay.
And that got me to thinking, you know what, maybe I should postpone this whole restaurant stuff for a bit. Maybe I'll go back in working like this. And that led to becoming a nursing assistant, which led me to going back in the military.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't re-enlist so much as I just kind of slipped back in, but in the reserves. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed being in the reserves. I then started taking classes to become a registered nurse. I started working at the VA. Got my certification. I went through nursing school, got my nursing certification, went back in the VA, went to Florida, which was my first job with the VA, but as an RN.
Okay.
And I had that thought again of, man, I went to culinary school and I had spent all this time trying to make something with the whole vegan thing. And it just kind of left me with like this, like maybe lost time, or I had compiled all this information from, my time in culinary school, these vegan recipes to just all these ideas. So I started thinking, maybe I'll put it in a book, and then maybe I'll make that book like the least hippie, most accessible vegan guide that's ever made. Because most of the vegan books I've seen are great, but they come from a very different granola-y, patchouli-y place that might not be as accessible to like the average Joe or something
Right,
like that.
for sure.
So I came up with Vegan Strong because the motto for the army at the time that I was in was Army Strong. So I was like, maybe I'll just grab that. The time as I was writing it, I had decided on that. I thought, man, maybe these guys will come after me because there was no other anything strong. And then Live Strong happened, and then almost after the school shootings and such, almost every area added a strong after their name. So kind of it wasn't as unique at that point, but there was a lot less chance the army was ever going to be grumpy at me.
Right.
And
yeah, exactly. I hear you. So I thank you for sharing all that. I literally had to grab a piece of paper because I was taking a few notes because I was like, I have so many questions given everything you've done. So I'm curious about a lot of things, but when you said that you're, someone who needs to like, I need to do something, I need to fix, I need to be a part of the solution. Did you have any military people in your family or anything like that? I'm curious to go from I'm living in Japan in bands, working as a translator to be like, yeah, I think I should join the military.
that's a good question. My dad was in the Navy.
Okay.
And my uncle was in the Army, but neither of their experiences really played into mine. I think I went pre going vegan. I had thought about joining the military, and what had kind of actually stopped me was the fact that they wear leather in the military, and that's when after going vegan, I was like, well, I can never wear leather, therefore I can never go in the military, and that was I thought about joining around the time I was a freshman in college, so that was when I was 18. I thought about it, and then I didn't end up joining until 9/11, and I was 29 at that point.
Okay.
So a significant amount of time.
Okay. Wow. So prior to, I guess my assumption, which is so interesting, is that you went vegan later in life. Because in my head, I can't even make the connection of like you being vegan already and going into the military.
So I later in life, as in I was an adult because I went vegan at 19.
Okay.
I was vegetarian at 18, vegan at 19.
What influenced you there? How did that happen?
The whole vegan vegetarian journey. So let's think back.
Because again, you were ahead of your time.
I would say not necessarily in the best way. I mean, especially, this is like 25. When did Burger King come out with a vegan burger? Like last year. So 27 years before they did that. Carl's Jr. has Beyond Burgers. I can go
That's
to
crazy
anywhere and get a Beyond Burger. It's nuts. And also, not only that, but they have Beyond breakfast sandwiches there, and Dunkin' Donuts have Beyond sandwiches. Now you have to ask them, don't put the cheese on, don't put the egg on, don't put this. But I mean, I don't know. It's totally exciting, and I love living in this age of easy vegan. Sometimes I talk to some people and they're like, "Oh, if it's a mock meat or something easy, you shouldn't eat it." I'm like, man, I'm almost at 30 years of doing this. Anything that can make it easier is better. And I literally think at this point, if it was any easier, the only way it could be easier is if someone held me like a baby, chewed my food up, and had it in my mouth. Like, what are people asking for? They want everything postmated to them. I mean, seriously, it's super stupid.
Yeah. I got us derailed, but how did you become vegan or vegetarian at 18 and then vegan at 19?
So before I went vegetarian or vegan, I gave up drinking at my first week of college.
Wow.
So I was heavily into the punk rock scene. There was a band called Minor Threat, which is about kind of like becoming your authentic you by not muddying your brain and your body with poison and drugs and stuff like that. And I that resonated with me because I spent my what would be senior week and that whole summer between my senior of right after I graduated from high school to my became a freshman in college. I spent that whole summer working on a ship with alcoholics. So instead of like being able to see, like instead of it being like, yay, it's like senior week and a bunch of 18-year-olds are drinking and it's all fun, it was like 40 to 50, 60-year-olds getting drunk and like shitting themselves and getting in the fights and seeing that as the wonderful world of alcoholism.
Yeah. And where were you?
That was all up and down the East Coast with an EP ship. And so that got me thinking, I need to make sure that never becomes me. And somehow it solidified, it started to gestate as an idea, I could go straight edge, which people, it's incredible when you tell someone that you don't drink, they automatically assume you're a recovering alcoholic. Yes. Or that you just are not fun. And I'm like, well, I mean, I kind of think I'm fun, at least sometimes. And no, I'm not an alcoholic or a former. I mean, I don't have anything against those people. A lot of them are my patients, but that's not me. Mm-hmm. I went into college my freshman year, kind of with that idea. Someone threw me a beer first week. I took a sip and I'm like, yeah, you know what? Fuck all this. I'm straight edge. And that was kind of like a feeling right there of like, it weirdly was the most rebellious thing I could possibly do. Because in high school, I drank in high school, like everyone I knew, like, and that was rebellion. But weirdly saying I would not be drinking those, or doing drugs or getting into substances was more of a rebellion. It said, hey, like, I will be my authentic self and you're going to have to like it, whether or at least you're going to have to deal with it. And so after doing that and having that thought, somehow I think through bumping into people who had dabbled with being vegetarian, that idea was exposed to me that and I think it was actually from a girl that I had dated. She wasn't even vegetarian. She had just said she didn't eat veal. And I remember ridiculing that idea. I was like, it was not because she didn't want to be cruel to cows, but that she still ate beef or cows. Right. She just didn't eat the baby cow. I'm like, so what happens when the cow grows up? I was like, this idea is ridiculous.
This doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. It's contradictory. But what that exposure to that idea had put it in my head, in the very back of it, but made me think, why do people eat animals? It's not like we're cavemen. It's not like there's any need for it. It's not like, and then the whole, it just kind of was in the back of my head. Yeah. So when Lent rolled around, because I was raised Catholic, and up until I went to college, I at least kind of followed along with whatever they were doing. My mom asked me, okay, it's time for Lent. What are you going to give up for Lent? And to be snarky and maybe an asshole, I said, oh, I'm going to not eat meat. Now, nowadays, if you told someone you weren't eating meat for 40 days, it'd be like, oh, that sounds like a nice cleanse or something. Right. That like some celebrity might endorse. But then that was basically like a fuck you to science, because science said that you needed to eat animals. Nutrition said that too. Then what about all these institutions? What about this, that, and the other? And I said, nah, I'll be fine. I'm just going to not eat meat. And people literally said, nice knowing you, like with a, like, not a joke, but they thought I was going to die.
Oh my God.
Or get very sick. Did any of that happen? No. Just being vegetarian for 40 days, nothing happened. Maybe I felt a little bit better. I was a college wrestler at that point, in great shape. I was fine.
Right.
And at that point, just being straight edge, being vegetarian, opened my mind up to the kind of like I'd heard the word vegan, and at some shows, people were passing around leaflets from PETA because there was no internet at that time.
Right.
So I got a leaflet from PETA at I can't remember what the band was, but on seeing it and then kind of starting to read up on it, I was like, this is kind of interesting and kind of weird why people would eat an egg from a chicken and feel like that's a need, or like drink, milk for baby cows. And then that got me starting to thinking about the byproducts, and because before I just been like vegetarian, I'm like, oh, okay, look at me, I'm doing something good.
Right.
Yes. Most people thought being vegetarian itself was insane. So vegan wasn't even like just vegetarian was mind blowing.
Right.
And then I remember I delivered pizzas for Domino's I guess the summer after my freshman year, and I started that experience still eating cheese pizza, and then in the middle of it, I was like not so into eating cheese anymore, and I would just peel the cheese off pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the end of it, I was like, it has to be like made without it, or I'm not going to eat it. I don't want that shit touching anything I'm going to eat. That's disgusting. And that was 1992.
Wow. I think what's striking me most is how our society is set up to a point where choosing to not drink alcohol and choosing to make dietary choices and be vegan is rebellious.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Isn't that wild? Like, those are the rebellious things.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I haven't drank in like 13 months. And I started because it was skyrocketing my anxiety. I was having some mental health stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to take a break. And then I just kind of kept not drinking. I was like, I feel so much better. And now I don't even think about it. But what I noticed in the beginning was how uncomfortable it made other people. Like I'd go out with my friends and sit at the bar and get some tea, and I'm gregarious and I don't need alcohol to talk to anybody. And people be like, oh, should I not drink? Are you okay? Is something wrong? I'm like, I just want some tea. Like, it was so much more stressful for other people than it was for me, which I think is so interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it depends if you're just going out to have fun versus you're going out to get fucking like hammered. I mean, those are two. It's our culture, and to be fair to America, I mean, cultures, a lot of other cultures I've been into, part of like drinking to the point where you're like you have lost control is kind of part of it.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I guess I get, but it's not really my jam.
Was that hard in college just because binge drinking is such a cultural thing?
It was, I guess it was hard in college, very absurd in Japan because the Japanese drinking culture is very pressury.
Oh, wow.
And then in the military, it was like off the charts. But I think through all of this, it has made me a very strong person. Like, I mean, and having that will, I mean, helps me in almost everything I do today. Especially, I work with veterans on a med-surg telemetry floor. Often people who have had crazy trauma, or they're going through dementia or alcohol withdrawal, and just having like and again, I think it comes from having so many years of being able to having to be strong. Just say like, hey, sir, I need you to do this. Right. And there's no like B or C. It's this. This is what we're going to do. And I mean, you can take all the time you want with it, but this is how it's going to be. Right. Because the B and C are not options. It's this. And 9 times out of 10, it just works because they're like, well, okay. I mean, fuck that. Give me this.
That's my only option.
I know I had a demented patient today who they were just unable to do anything with. And I'm like, no worries. I'm like, Mr. Such and Such, I need you to sit. We're going to draw your blood. And he would try to move. And I was, no, we're okay. And it took 2 or 3 minutes. And then I got him to sit and then turned his arm over and we drew blood. And I was just, I think the fact that it wasn't like, I wasn't like, well, sir, if you want, if you don't want it, you know, it was like,
Right.
no, it's going to be and there's no, this is the way the highway is going. There's no reverse in a highway.
Do you think that's influenced too by your time in the military?
Very much so. I mean, the Sergeant Vegan comes from, I was a sergeant. So,
Right.
And yeah, no, I mean, I was in charge of people and stuff. So having that, that experience of telling people like, hey, this is how it's going to be, this is what you're going to do. And this is how it's going to be. At first, probably it was a weird switchover because for a lot of time in the military, I was just in charge of making sure my platoon was safe,
right,
and just making sure I was safe. But then when it converted to, I have to tell other people tell other people how they should do things, and what, you know, that was kind of a transition.
What was it like being vegan and straight edge in the military?
So being vegan straight edge in the military, that's a good question. I think being vegan straight edge in America is different from being vegan straight edge in Japan, is different from doing it in Europe. And it also depends on, I think the big thing is what you're doing and who your friends are,
right,
and what your job is, what your social circle. For example, in Japan, very big drinking culture. So people would kind of look at me, their first thought is, oh, it's weird that you're a white guy. Then it's a weird that you're a white guy and you speak Japanese. And then it's a weird that you're a white guy, speak Japanese, but you don't drink. And then on top of that, you don't eat animals. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Who are you?
Exactly. And then in Europe, a little bit of the same, but then I knew a lot of vegan straight edge, or at least some vegan straight edge people in Europe when I lived in Italy, and in Japan I knew some too. So if in my close circle, it was like, you know, being in the States, like, yes, some people they look at us kind of like we're weird, but then right, your friends are like, yeah, I get it. You know, like, it's not weird. I mean, it's as weird as we are. So
right.
In the military, also a big drinking culture. So they look at that weird, obviously the same thing as they would look at being vegan, as kind of like a weird thing, especially if you're from Texas and you've never met somebody who's not from Texas. And then on top of that, they're telling you that plants have all the protein that you need. I'm sure it's a cultural experience.
Yeah.
I think the straight edge thing didn't come up as much in the military unless we were just, quote unquote, in garrison, meaning able to do whatever we want. If you're in training, whether it's boot camp, usually airborne school, whether I was in RIP or doing other training, you're mostly in a dry environment. So you're and deployed too, except for some circumstances where people might have been able to get booze on the sly. Usually it's a dry environment. So other than smoking, I mean, no one I knew that was a smoker going into the military quit, because it's not the whole smoke 'em if you got 'em kind of nonsense that you see on TV. It still exists to some extent, even in 2020, I'm sure.
Wild.
Not in basic training, but if you're deployed, what are you doing other than waiting for something bad to happen, or on the way to it, you know?
Right.
So, how is it like to be vegan in the military? Well, it depends on what you're doing, what your branch is, where you are, and whether you're in a training scenario, whether you're deployed, whether you're just a person. So for me, it wasn't always bad to be vegan in the military. When I was stationed in Italy, I had access to plenty of vegan food. I bring up in my book, I had access to a kitchen because I pulled some strings and worked the system to be able to get access to a kitchen and to get my own apartment. But while I was in basic training, it was pretty much a suck fest. It's not that anyone was forcing me to eat meat, was forcing me to eat dairy, was saying, sure plenty of people were telling me that vegans were dumb, but no one was actually trying to tell me or forcing me to eat anything. It's just that they didn't have vegan options. So breakfast might be dry cereal. Why? Because they had cornflakes. Cornflakes are vegan.
Right.
Did they have soy milk, hemp milk, oat milk, rice milk? No. They did have cow's milk, which I do not drink. So then the next option was, if I wanted something on it, I might put like fruit cocktail on it.
Oh God, that sounds so awful.
It is bad. It is bad, and I do not recommend it at any point. But the thing is, I think it wasn't all that bad for me because I realized long ago that almost everything in life is temporary. So whether it's the best thing that's ever happened to you or the worst thing, it has an expiration date on it. You're gonna get through it. I remember going on family trips as the only vegan until my brother went vegan, where there wouldn't be anything. So I would make a broccoli sandwich. I would take 2 pieces of bread. I would put broccoli on it and eat it. At any point, is that something like that you're like, yum, 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 I'm loving it? No, like it sucks. And most people that I know that have been vegan like me for decades, I'm at 28 years and some change. So pretty soon I'm going to be coming out with 3 decades. If you've been vegan that long, you have almost an infinite amount of, and no shit, there I was sucking it up, kind of vegan stories. But I think a more important thing for listeners and people who are thinking about going vegan to realize is that shit is in the past.
Right.
Yeah, me and people that I know that are like me have paved the way. Were there. We would choose to not eat an animal in literally any circumstance.
Right.
But now it's more the choice of, there you are. You're in Carl's Jr. Do you get the Beyond Burger, which is extremely delicious and vegan as long as you ask for no cheese, or do you eat a dead animal? Basically roadkill. I mean, it's
right.
I guess your only question is fries and a soda, or do you like try to pretend that you're being healthy and just drink water? Like it's I guess that's where vegan is now, and that's where vegan always should have been.
Right.
So yeah, I like to make sure that we always go back to that fact, because I think when we harp too much on, the quote unquote vegan war stories, I think people get lost in the fact that vegan is so super easy. And if you're not doing it, you got to question yourself, like, why not?
Well, and I think that I always love those memes or when people post about stuff, when someone tells them, I've never eaten anything vegan. And it's like, an apple.
Yeah, someone brought up the other day, Skittles. Have you ever had Skittles? Then you have had a vegan snack.
Yeah.
And I remember when Skittles first went vegan, because they weren't vegan originally.
Mm-hmm.
When they first went vegan, we ate Skittles all the time. And now I can't stand Skittles.
Overdid it.
If someone offers them to me, I'll be like, ugh.
Can't do it.
Yeah, it would have to be some extreme circumstances.
Were you like kind of razzed in the military for being vegan? Because I interviewed John Rush. He's a Canadian pro football player.
Okay.
And he was worried at first about sharing that he was vegan, like if there would be repercussions.
What, that people would make fun of him? Like,
well, that, and if they were going to like question his ability to be a strong athlete and be on the field.
I can understand that. Not that eating plant-based or vegan has any effect on that, but
right.
Only in that perception, in that some of the shit that I got was fact-based, in that I was trying out to be a ranger. And I think the bottom line was, not to overstate it, but I remember the in-process day where he said, men, rangers are not soldiers, they are fucking killers. Oof. I mean, that was kind of the mentality. And here I am like, I'm a really good medic, but I'm obviously not a killer.
Right.
I mean, like,
Right.
I'm more likely to try to save someone than kill them. So maybe that I could see that being called into question, especially if you're like, if your mentality is let's go kill some motherfuckers, kind of like that.
Right.
You can't see the air quotes probably on the podcast, but that's what I'm doing. Which I can understand that mentality, and if you get in the mentality, I can understand if in the military where you would question, vegans. Now, granted, I was a medic, and let's go save some motherfuckers might be more my mentality.
Right.
No air quotes for that. But if you're a football player, it's kind of a similar mentality, or
right.
It's like super macho or whatever. But yeah, I get it. I mean, military is kind of a gang frat mentality. Like it's very us against them. Even just within people are doing a similar thing. It's so us against them. Like I remember as someone trying out to be a ranger, there was so much like complete disdain for non-paratroopers, and people, they're basically like, if you're not at least a paratrooper, you're a complete piece of shit.
Wow.
Like we, mostly them, but I mean, everyone called people that were not paratroopers legs, because apparently, like, that basically, yeah, would sometimes to their faces, like we would go to a dining facility and call it a DFAC, call it the leg DFAC, and we would just call it the leg DFAC and call them that while we were there. And that's kind of the attitude that the military, basically, I think why it creates that tribalism.
Right, that's intentional, right?
Oh yeah, it's part of in process. It's part of, you create a person for a job, and you create the person who has the mentality for that job, because you're going to be creating, you're passing on not only the how you do something, but how you think about doing something.
Right, which is fascinating and also kind of scary that.
Oh, it's should be terrifying, but some of it is necessary, especially with like my job. It was never totally asked upon me, but it was always kind of like possibly there that we're going to ask you to do some shit that would probably get you killed. And bare minimum, we're going to ask you to jump out of an airplane.
Right.
With a whole bunch of equipment. And if you don't do that, you're fucking out of here.
Right. Which is a pretty heavy bare minimum.
Yeah. So you kind of create this persona, and you're kind of brainwashed into it. And I think part of the brainwashing, to be fair to the military, is necessary to kind of squash those thoughts of, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this shit because it's counterproductive to me living through this.
Right.
Or,
Ooh, that's dark.
So yeah. But anyway, I guess one of the things about being a sergeant vegan, and that, like, yeah, the sergeant vegan, it's a playful take on the fact that I was vegan in the military, but I was definitely in the military. So that's, I think it's good to be multifaceted when people are only like, oh yes, I'm this, and it's just that. It's kind of boring too. I think people should be multidimensional and be able to see other people's focuses, whether it's
right.
Politics or food or whatever.
Did you convert anyone in the military to veganism? Probably not when you were eating frosted flakes with fruit cup.
I had a lot of conversations about it, and I know people dabbled in plant-based on talking to me. I think what I did more than making someone or pushing someone to go full vegan or plant-based or whatever is I know I made people rethink whatever like snickering jokes they might have about vegans, especially when I was beating them in a physical fitness test and like lapping them and like yelling as I ran by, it's because you're not vegan, or like my part of where the Sergeant Vegan came about as creating a character is there was this wrestling character called Sergeant Slaughter. It was a G.I. Joe character, I think.
Okay.
And I thought it would be funny to apply how I was in the military, which was way over the top, way overdoing it, as a way to basically shut up some people who were talking shit about me being vegan. So I would try to outdo them. So, and call them a fucking wuss for not working out enough.
Right.
And then basically call into question their whole like, well, I eat meat. Well, who fucking cares if I'm beating you right here?
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. It just goes to show whatever the fuck you thought you were doing is not good enough. So it was kind of silly, but it was kind of out of necessity, because I thought, I'm, as especially in the reserves, I was in charge of medics. I basically can't have these guys talking shit on me, especially for this. And there's no way that I could hide being vegan. At that point too, I had vegan power on my car, like gigantic across the windshield. So there was no hiding it from day one. But I decided that I didn't, well, I've never hid being vegan, but even, especially then, instead of like trying to just have it be a part of me, have it be like out in the open, where I stand and who I am.
So is that why you wrote the book Vegan Strong, is to kind of break through those stereotypes?
Like I said before, I've been vegan for now 28 years. And something that I've seen throughout the years that's bothered me is that being vegan is awesome. It is the best way to eat, both for your health, for the planet, and to gain muscle and to be fit. But people have done a really poor job in the PR department of making vegan look cool.
Right.
And have done a very poor job of showing people that vegan is normal. And why? Yes. I think it's because, unfortunately, I think people have often taken this as like part of a package deal of being how should I put this? Being a weirdo. Like they're like, okay, I'm gonna go vegan, and that's great. But then I'm also gonna hate the government, be like, listen to wacky music. And as a former punk rocker, I can say listen to wacky music. I mean, I still listen to punk and hardcore and metal, but it becomes this checklist of weird or a rebellion when, yeah, I guess, I mean, as someone who went through it, being vegan was seen as an act of rebellion, especially in my teens. And yeah, being vegan made me different in Japan and in the military.
Right.
But there is nothing inherently weird about choosing to not destroy the planet or eat a dead animal. In fact, it's kind of like in a training scenario or not even a training scenario, where you're in some kind of survival situation where you have to eat something that's awful and disgusting. Hey, I get it. But,
right.
If there's that, I was in the tundra and we had to eat our horse or something like that. I get it. Whatever you got to do to survive. But if you're going to like McDonald's and buying a burger, you're not doing that to survive. Like, yes. That is not inherently necessary for you to be breathing. And most people that I've seen that go to McDonald's and my patients that eat that crap, they're doing the opposite. It's something that's leading to their, to their demise, not survival.
Yes. So being a nurse, a registered nurse, an RN, and being vegan, how does that play into your job?
So I work nights, so I'm not really there around mealtime. I'm not usually there when most people who are not demented or going through withdrawals from drug and alcohol are awake. Like if you're like a quote unquote normal patient, like, and I rarely see these, like I would call them like the unicorn, where they're like a normal dude, because most veterans are guys, but I guess 10% of veterans are women, maybe a little less. But a normal male or female who is normally healthy, but then my heart hurts, and I see that like that is such a rare occurrence where someone would have those kind of that kind of situation where they're quote unquote normal, other than a heart condition. which in a perfect world, that's the only patients I should be seeing. Instead, I have
Right.
most of my patients are there for dementia or drugs or some kind of stuff. So the patients that I would see in a perfect world who are just there for their heart, they would be sleeping at night. But those are the only people that would probably benefit from hearing this. Because if you're in late stage dementia, of my group I had yesterday, of my 4 or 5 patients, one guy, he's alert and oriented ×1, which means he only knows his name. He's like, you've ever seen that movie Memento, where he can only remember things for 10 seconds. So trying to have a talk about why you should be vegan or plant-based with that dude would be a waste of time. The other guy was, maybe he knows his name and where he is, but at 95, and I'm spent most of the shift trying to get him from pulling a urinary catheter out, which would have created this blood volcano out of his penis. So trying to have a talk with that guy about, hey, sir, I see you're trying to pull your catheter out, but have you thought about going plant-based? I almost feel like that would have been great. The other two, one of the guys might have, and then the other guy completely not. The other guy was there for alcohol, and I think there was one guy who was there for being watched for on suicide watch. So yeah, it's extremely rare that I have patients that would be like that, and when they do, or if they ask questions like, "Hey," I'm like, "Oh, funny you should ask. You could get off your statins if you eat meat, because why are you on so many statins? Because of your diet. By diet, I mean you eat too much meat, and by too much, I mean you eat meat, period. If you didn't eat that, we wouldn't need to give you these statins." And do those conversations come up? Yes. Do I facilitate them? Yes. But do I push them? No, not really. It's not my place to be, if they ever start organically, for sure.
Right.
Usually I'm just like, "Hey sir, here's your medication. Here's what I'm giving you. Here's what we're doing for you. Here's how we're helping you at the moment. Anything else you need? Okay. Talk to you later."
Is it hard to be in that system? Like, I had somebody I have followed for a long time. Her dad had a heart attack, and he's fine now, but he was in the hospital, and the food they tried to serve him, she was just like, "No, this is why. Like, this is exactly why this cycle's continuing, because he's in the hospital for a heart attack and you're giving him crap."
Yes, the food that we serve our patients at the VA is pretty awful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that we have to acknowledge. But to be fair to the VA, part of the reason is because the American taxpayer, most of them are super, should I say, cheap or unwilling to pay taxes. I mean, it's from the top down.
Yeah.
I mean, from our esteemed president on down, people don't want to pay taxes.
Right.
I mean, I think paying taxes and paying into the system is one of the most patriotic things you can do.
Let's pause on that and let that sink in for the listener.
You're literally funding your country and taking care of those that need it. So yeah, I think actually
it's a resource thing.
Exactly. Actually funding the VA better would have us be able to do better things with it. Unfortunately, I think part of that, and I think they would need to have people who are very good at making sure the right things got funded, because I could see the wrong person at system saying, "Oh, a budget is X billion or million," or I don't know how many illions it is, and then saying like, "I think we're going to, build some more buildings and some other stuff we don't need,"
right,
and then kick that back to these people to justify that budget. Versus, I know on my floor, what do we need? We need new computers. Most of the computers don't work well. So when I need to be giving a patient a med because they really freaking need it, I have to scan something a bazillion times or restart the computer, and this has happened more times than I can count, I have to find another computer to drag over there.
Oh my gosh.
And that's an issue. Or vital signs machines. Most of our vital signs machines are look like they're from the 90s, which I know for people doesn't seem that old, but it's old. And
medical
they're falling
field.
apart. And when you need a vital signs machine to see, like, this guy says he can't breathe, but how is his oxygen saturation? If it's 100%, well, then maybe it's more psychological. But if it's 70%, then we need to do something immediately about this. But if I can't find one because we only have a couple of them and they're all busted up, that creates another problem. So,
wow.
Yeah, I think that would be a huge thing, getting better food, getting better equipment. But the VA and the government in general, this is a government that loves to spend money just on stupid things and then charge the taxpayers. And I can see people not wanting to pay for things that we don't need, like extraneous wars or, the president's golf trips in Mar-a-Lago or something.
Yeah, I love how those can go on the same list. Which is also a good segue, because what I appreciate about, one of the many things I appreciate about following you is how you, in an approachable way, make topics intersect and show the connection between systems and food and government and climate. And, even just talking about this, like veterans and the VA and not having money for food to like help. It's just all so connected. And I think you do that really well. And not only that, but you don't shy away from those conversations. And I really appreciate that. Some of your content makes people think. It also makes me laugh. There was a video of you in like a Bass Pro Shop.
Yes. So I think you're referring to the video I recently made about hunting. There's a show that I watched because I don't know if it's on anymore, called Top Shot, about competition shooting. And I went to a Bass Pro Shop only because they're always talking it up. I mean, it's basically outdoors, but also hunting and fishing and other kind of things that I don't give a crap about. But They had an indoor, one of those shooting ranges, but it was like, just not even airsoft. It was just like electronic.
Oh, okay.
So I made sure to bring some quarters to just shoot up this range. And in 2020, why would anyone be, hunting other than doing something like that? Like, you're clearly not doing it for your survival.
Right.
None of the people that I talk to that hunt are like, living in the great outdoors and the outback, and it's that, or they don't, no, these are people that go shoot up some animals for fun, and they do their shopping at Ralph's. Like, so, they pretend that they're outdoorsmen, or it's some kind of like something for survival, but instead they're just being jerks and trying to use their desire to abuse animals and kill them to make them feel like more manly or whatever crap. I don't know.
Well, and I think that's another thing that I love talking to people with all these intersecting identities. And that's something I think you can be a poster child for, because all the things we've talked about are so fascinating to fit into one human, right? And that's how all of us are, but it doesn't always feel like we can share those parts. So we've talked about you being a veteran, and talked about you being vegan and an RN, and rewriting what it means to be masculine, I think.
Yeah, I think what part of it is that people often get, either it's passed down from their dad or from their friends, and these days I think a lot of it is from the internet. They watch videos and then they create this checklist for masculinity. It's like, what does a man look like? What does a man act like? And they're like, oh, okay. I see from these movies that a guy is always confident and acts like an asshole to women, and supports the Second Amendment no matter what, and this, that, and the other. And that's where they get to think that this idea. I don't think that it's necessarily that people are, you don't have to put a value judgment like good or bad or whatever. It's they get this picture of, this is what
it's socialized.
exactly. Like, people think they should also be like a little bit insecure in their sexual preference. So anything people, saying that you're gay or something like that
Right.
is something that you should be worried about. And also being around people that are gay should make you worried. Like, which makes no sense to me at all. And this is why it makes no sense to me if I'm going to get on this topic, is that, so if you think about it rationally, people that are gay, if you're straight, are only means that it's less competition. So if you were in a room full of gay dudes and one chick, it means it's only you and her. Like, you got this. So why you would be like worried about them,
Right.
except if that you're secretly worried that you're gay.
That you're going to
And
catch it.
yeah, like it's some kind of fucking disease. Like, come on, people. Like, people have always been either gay or straight or whatever. So why that it would be something that concerns you? Kind of like the whole transgender thing. Like, if anything, we should feel compassion and like, man, in a world where there's so much to worry about, in a world where there's so many scary things,
Yes.
here are people that feel like they're trapped in the wrong gender's body. How completely terrifying that must be. So to have anything but empathy and compassion for these people makes no sense, A. And B, like, yet once again, what are you worried that you're going to catch something from them? Like, you're
Right.
going to be like, maybe I should change my gender? Or are you worried that maybe you're kind of like secretly going to do the same thing? Like all of
It's
that
wild.
is ridiculous to me. And lastly, if it's anything because of Jesus, because a lot of the people that are
For
like
sure.
that are very religious, Jesus, and I can say this as a former Catholic and someone that's read the Bible, Jesus never goes out and says anything about people that are gay.
Mm-hmm.
He never goes out and says anything about people that are trans. In fact, he only talks about people in a way of love and acceptance. So if you want to look in the Bible, and by Bible, I'm talking about, as a Christian, I'm talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, if you're
Okay.
going to mention some Old Testament shit to me, has nothing to do with Jesus. And if we're going to talk about the Old Testament, those are books that are talking about the experience of the Jewish people. And from almost everyone, and I think I say almost everyone because I know a lot, I've met a lot of people or have friends that are Jewish, but none of them have ever expressed overt homophobic stuff to me. They've all been very accepting people. So, you like, why it's just the people that I know that are like Christian that would feel that way about.
Right.
That makes no sense. So yeah, if anything, Jesus would question their overt homophobic and kind of like creepiness, I think.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes to all of the above. That is, I think what you just articulated is something sometimes I get tongue tied around because I'm not very familiar with the Bible. I like kind of push that off for most of my
So
life.
you're not missing much, but the kind of like, as a Catholic, I can say that. I can also say that reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you only get one thing. You get God is love. Basically, you get a bunch of Bob Marley songs. I mean, seriously, that's what Jesus was talking about. So for anybody to take those books and then find some hate in it, maybe, I mean, Jesus occasionally would talk about hating money in the church, or he also kind of, I think he got asked on the topic, and I think he hated divorce, which I might not be with him on that. I think when people are in an unhappy marriage, sometimes people aren't meant to be together. I mean, yeah, it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not meant to be together, okay, well, I mean, better move on.
Right.
But Jesus wasn't hateful, at least when asked about it. Maybe personally he was, but he kept that to himself, you know. So whatever, I don't know, if you read any of that, you would basically just get, hey, Jesus more or less comes off as the hippie you knew at some veg fest. like with a tie-dye shirt, and then like, you know, he said things like blessed are the meek, like where the evangelicals will get like basically might makes right out
Right.
of, you know, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. Like Jesus is a fucking hippie. And if you go by what Jesus said, if everybody did that, the world would be a better place.
Oh
For
my
sure.
gosh.
But instead, I feel like religion, and especially like whatever kind of creepy Christianity they're pulling out of that, has only been used to justify bad things. Like, I believe they
Yes.
used the religion to justify slavery, which Jesus would for sure not have been down with. For sure.
Wasn't white.
Yeah, well, he wasn't white. And not only that, he was about equality, fairness. Jesus would not have been cool with slavery, or the modern day racism we have. Jesus wouldn't have been cool with. I mean, that is if Jesus was existed. I don't know. You could argue that either way.
I'm forever gonna refer to the Bible as a bunch of Bob Marley songs from here on out. If I take one thing away from this.
So let's be clear. The New Testament, specifically the books with Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, could be, I think, basically considered Bob Marley. But the Old Testament would definitely be Slayer, because you basically have famine, disease, death. You have like all kinds of crazy shit. God burning people, like sacrifice your son, like all kinds of like wackadoodle shit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why anyone would be into very creepy stuff. I think if you actually made a movie based on the Old Testament, it would have to be rated XXX. I mean, no.
It's terrifying
Stuff.
Oh my gosh. So given everything that you do,
okay,
and how you are, as someone else who's trying to make the world a little bit of a better place, how do you kind of drop in and take care of yourself and recharge?
Before the military, I mostly ran, and now post-military, now I just lift. I enjoy it. I feel great doing it, and it's great for your health. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I also like writing. I obviously wrote Vegan Strong, but I'm currently finishing up my second book, which is actually a children's book called The Adventures of Sergeant Piggy. And for me, creating and writing, it's a way to take me out of all the things, especially negative things, because I mean, like all of us in this crazy political climate and in this COVID climate, we're just kind of almost drowning in negativity. But being like working with sick people, and I guess sick and dying people would be a better way to put it, 12 hours a day for most of the week, it's really easy to just get like almost a feeling of drowning in just the negative. So I like to be able to leave that at work, to come home, to create, to kind of like put myself in a better space, because there is so much that's positive and awesome about the world. No matter who is president, no matter what is going on, the world is an awesome, wonderful place. And I think if we lose sight of that in the few negative things that are currently going on, I think we lose that balance. And I think also we're in the military, we'd say combat effective or combat ineffective. I think as activists or people that are trying to make it through the world, when you get caught up in the negative and you don't think of the positive, you don't keep that PMA or that positive mental attitude, I think it's easy to get kind of burdened down by the bad stuff.
Yes.
And then when people talk to you, they only are left with a negative feeling, kind of like an aftertaste of like swallowing a vitamin, where you're like, you want to get, you want to get rid of that.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, I talked to this person and, they talked to me about veganism or whatever. And instead of feeling, sad about all the, starving children or suffering animals, you felt like, oh yeah, like life is great. We're doing well. You get that kind of like a push, a charge, you know?
Well, and you want to leave a conversation with feeling like, oh, that was helpful. There's something I can do.
Yeah.
Instead of leaving it and being like, wow, the world sucks and there's nothing I can fucking do about it.
Yeah, nobody, I don't think that feeling of dread and doom and gloom is positive. My folks are super into politics, and I think they are part of the reason that I'm a slightly interesting or like complex person, in that they're both super Catholic, super Christian, and very liberal, and very. My dad was a scientist. My mom was a teacher, so very much into education and learning too. So I think but occasionally they get overly caught up with the negative politics and how much they like Trump and this, that, and the other. And I think being able to talk to them and navigate that and realize, yeah, like there is plenty of things that bum me out, but that realize that there's also plenty of things that are great, and that no person that you talk to is going to be either completely good or completely bad.
Right.
I'm sure even some of the worst people had their good qualities, and you know, some of even the best people had their bad qualities.
Right.
So I think just kind of keeping like an open mind and kind of like being even keel about things and not letting yourself get bogged down by all the negative is very important.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or haven't shared that you need space to share?
I would encourage anyone that's curious to check me out on social media. I'm Sergeant Vegan. That's SGT Vegan on Instagram and Facebook. SGTvegan.com on the web. The book is called Vegan Strong, and that's available on Amazon.
I can put all that in the show notes for people to find you really easily too.
Sweet. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would probably be in a town near you speaking about veganism and my book. Pre-COVID, I was traveling around. I currently have on my docket trying to advocate advocate for the animals in all 50 states, and I think I'm almost at 30, and I was going to start finishing up the 50 and then start to go to every country, but then COVID hit, and now I've been doing it virtually, which
not the same.
You know, it's not the same. It's a lot easier. I mean, driving through Wyoming like last year and Montana, beautiful states, but some of that shit sucks because it's like how can it be snowing in October? What kind of shit is this?
It snowed up here. I'm in northern Minnesota this morning, October 1st.
I was actually supposed to be in Minnesota this year until that shit got canceled.
Okay.
So I would say, actually, let me change that. Not canceled, but postponed.
There you go.
Hopefully next year. Oh, last thing I would like to mention. So I know this kind of dates this a little bit, but I don't think it's going to go away within the next couple months. COVID-19 is real. It does affect people. And for the super hippies that believe that their immune system protects them and they don't need a mask, I would say, yes, you might be correct that your immune system is protecting you, but the mask is not just for you, it's for other people. When I wear a mask with my patients, I'm not wearing a mask solely so I don't get sick. I'm wearing a mask so they don't get sick.
Right.
So I think people need to reconsider this anti-masker stuff. It doesn't make you into some kind of like hero or strong person to want to possibly endanger people that are sick with immune systems that are compromised in our community. So you not wearing a mask and possibly giving this to someone's grandma, someone's mom, someone's dad, someone's brother, sister that has a weakened immune system, it only means that you're a selfish jerk. It doesn't mean that you're brave. It doesn't mean that like, ooh, look at me, I'm going to Walmart without a mask. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I know that it's inconvenient to put a mask on. Just like it might be inconvenient to not drive drunk if you're drunk, but people need to stop being jerks about this whole thing. Like, look, like, I get you not wanting to do that. I get you not wanting to have to do the bare minimum to keep others safe. But just do it, like, and wash your hands, and we can all get through this. We can get through it and start trying and being able to have fun again, like the way we did before, around other people, and not having to worry that we're going to get our most vulnerable and weak and sick among us ill and possibly die. So it's only going to get worse during the flu season too, where you have a whole bunch of things commingling. And I just think people have to acknowledge that and move on. And I don't understand what the deal with that is. So I would leave you with that. Wear a mask, wash your hands, be safe, go vegan, stay vegan strong.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I hope you enjoyed that episode and you learned how to stay vegan strong with Bill. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit subscribe wherever you're listening. If you want to help this podcast get into the ears of more listeners, send it to a friend, text it to a family member, share it on social media. However you can help, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you want to be read on air as a review of the week in one of my solo podcast episodes, head over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, and you could hear it on air next week. Until next time.